Welcome to another edition of Is It Worth Reading with Frank and Richard. My name is Frank Biaggi, and my good friend Richard Paris is with us today, I hope. Richard, are you with us?
I'm here.
Fantastic. Okay, so Richard and I are going to do another book critique today on a bestseller. It's called American Dirt. And Richard picked this book. And so, Richard, I'm going to ask you if you would just start off by letting us know why you picked the book and then tell us a little bit about the book.
I'd be happy to, Frank. Thank you. Thank you for the intro. So I happen to have somewhat accidentally read an excerpt from this book, American Dirt. It was kind of like the first chapter where a horrendous mass murder occurs. And it was very well written, and I wanted to know how it turned out. So I brought it forward and suggested that we read that book so I could see how it all turned out. And it's actually a pretty long book. It goes through quite a bit here of the travails and hardship of this mother with her child. So the author is Janine Cummings, yes, and this was a bestseller. What I thought about the author is that she has a really good grasp of human nature, and her descriptions are they almost make you feel like you're there. They're very explicit and detailed and filled with great descriptive adjectives and all that kind of stuff. In fact, I wanted to actually read an excerpt from one page just to demonstrate that. I realized when I was more than halfway through that the author had a specific agenda, which I hadn't been really aware of. The agenda being the horrors of the immigration policy of the USA. I don't mind her having that agenda, but I just felt somewhat blindsided that was sort of what she was getting across. I just kind of wanted a really suspenseful story without thinking that someone was doing this all to make a point. I mean, she goes through the horrific journey that an illegal immigrant has to go through to escape a horrific situation to get to the USA, such as the kidnapping and all the deaths and starvation and rape. And then what they have to go through when they get closer to the border patrol vigilantes. And then on the journey, which in this book, a lot of it took place on a train, on top of a train, in fact, going through all the dangers and just having to deal with the Mexican police and the cartel. I mean, it's absolutely astounding, the extent of the hardship. And obviously, it's a novel, so it isn't like a true account. But based on what we know, it reflects a lot of what actually occurs. And I agree, it does definitely give food for thought about how we handle illegal immigrants. And I believe that was basically why the author wrote the book. So anyways, just to demonstrate how good she is with words, I'm amazed. She actually, I believe, has a real talent there. I just wanted to read this excerpt, Frank, if you allow me to.
Oh, go ahead, Richard. You're doing great so far.
Okay, so on page 159, at least I assume your pages are the same as mine. So this is just a random sample. And this is an important character of the book, reflecting on what her home was like, where she lived, and now she had to leave to escape. And so she's describing how it was back home. And she says, again, I'm reading the author's word for word. We loved it. We loved it even before we knew about any other locations. I'm adding those words. Because the trees had these enormous dark green leaves, as big as a bed, and they would sway in the wind. And when it rained, you could hear the big fat raindrops splatting onto those green leaves. And you could only see the sky in bright blue patches if you were walking a long way off to a friend's house or to church or something. When you passed through a clearing and all those leaves would back away and open up, and the hot sunshine would beat down all yellow and gold and sticky. And there were waterfalls everywhere with big rock pools where you could take a bath. And the water was always warm and it smelled like sunlight. And at night there was the sound of the tree frogs and the music of the rushing water from the falls. and all the songs of the night birds. And Mommy would make the most delicious chelade, and Abila would sing to us in the old language, and Soledad, that's her sister, and I would gather herbs and dry them and bundle them for Poppy to sell in the market when he had a day off, and that's how we passed our days. So I think she's a very talented author. And I think that's all I want to say at the moment, Frank. I am interested in your thoughts since you usually surprise me.
Richard, I'm going to tell you, we're both in agreement on this book. I mean, spot on to the fact of I love the first half of the book. And I'm going to read you some notes because I make notes while I'm reading the books.
Sure.
And it's funny. One of the notes I read was, we can see it too. Page 159. The descriptions are amazing. The page,
You're kidding. You're kidding.
right there.
I believe you.
No, I'm not kidding you. And so then I go on to say, this author takes you there. You are not just reading this book. You are in this book. You're living this book and can feel it like it's real. You will not be able to put this book down. These are my notes to the first half. I'm going to tell you things changed in the second half. I see shades of Hemingway with her vivid descriptions combined with symbolism and meaning. And as you know, I was an English major at Whitman, so I studied Hemingway, I studied Faulkner, and Faulkner with her use of past and present for emphasis and dramatic effect. She uses Lydia, the mother, when she speaks in her tense, and then the word mammy, which is what her son Lucas calls her, when she speaks from her son's perspective, which is really cool. So you're back and forth, and it's like a different person because it's a different tense, which gives such a depth and understanding. Her son can't speak, then he can speak, then he can't speak until he finds his true love, Rebecca, and then he can speak perfectly and instantly. It just literally gives you goosebumps when you read it. Yeah. The way she writes it. I said, I know the book is about immigrants and how people can become them and their plight to get to a better place to live. It shows the reasons that people from around the world have to flee their home due to evil that exists there. And it does all this by taking us there so we can feel what they feel. Immigrants are normal people who have had bad set of circumstances. Anyone can become a migrant. We both are in agreement on that. And I absolutely loved it. And I texted some of my contacts right at that point. And I said, I was going to read the text, but I don't want to take the time of finding it. But I said, this book is amazing. I hope she doesn't ruin it in the second half. She did. So let's look at the second half. So I'm going to share my screen. You know, before I show that, and she started ruining it before she got to what I'm going to show you. But so she took these two girls, and 14 and 15-year-olds, Rebecca, the 14-year-old who her son had his first love crush on. And I'm going to guess, I mean, let's just take it beyond the story and make it up, but they probably ended up getting married in the fictional life. But okay, so her sister had been sexually abused by this international gang member, and he'd raped her, he'd pimped her out. And so then all of a sudden he wanted to bring Rebecca, her younger sister, in and start using her too. So Soledad, the older sister, the 15-year-old, says, okay, we're going to flee Honduras and we're going to go away. Right. And that was about the first half of the book. And I went, wow, this is going to be great. It's good over evil. They're going to get away from it all. They're going to escape the United States. And then all of a sudden, the two teenage girls get gang raped, both of them, by five bad guys. And then their dad gets stabbed, and then not only stabbed, but stabbed in the eye into the brain. And then he dies a horrible death in the hospital in a coma. And then a guy gets run over in the railroad track, cut in half, and they describe it. It just goes on and on. It's like, you know, when you eat some ice cream or eat some cake, a little bit of ice cream, a little bit of cake is good. Like I can get the first part of the book where 16 family members get murdered and killed and all this horrible stuff's happening, but give us some relief, like don't keep cramming the cake down my face. And so what she did is she just kept doing it more and more in the second half, even before she started getting into this political stuff. So then she gets into more of the horrors, and then she gets into this political stuff, which just totally ruined it. We're there. So I went every year, never missed one, and they didn't deport you, not until now. But why not? Marisol shrugs. I never committed any offenses. I have a daughter who's a citizen. They have discretion, Nicholas says. They're supposed to be able to use their discretion so they can divert their resources to deporting bad guys, gang members, criminals. But now suddenly they're deporting people just for showing up at their check-ins, Marisol says. And that's what happened to you, Lydia asked. Marisol nods. But now everyone was alarmed by the spike in arrests, and some people stopped going to the check-ins altogether. Not Marisol. She hadn't been willing to demote her daughters to a life in the shadows. So she never really believed they'd deport someone like her, a middle-class woman with perfect English who came here legally, a homeowner, a medical professional. So you were in detention for 2 months, Nicholas asked. She gropes her word and her memories of the place. Horrible. I slept on a mat in a cold cell, freezing all the time. No blankets, no pillows, only those tinfoil things. I woke up stiff and sore every morning, etc. Yeah, it was utterly dehumanizing. But my lawyer thought I had a good chance. I told myself to be strong. It would be all worth it. But it was such a waste of time, Marisol says. So many mothers in there without their daughters, without their children. Some had babies taken right out of their arms. Back to Nicholas. Weren't you eligible for a student visa as a PhD candidate? I took a sabbatical for 1 semester, he shrugs. Didn't realize I had to file extra paperwork for that. So that was it. You got deported because of paperwork? Yep. If he's a product of a magic trick, his deportation is ludicrous feat of wonder. Lydia will not think about any of it. Most especially, she won't think about those families separated at the border, the children lifted straight out of their mother's arms. She absolutely cannot. So what she did, when you're talking about migrants and the ICE people and the immigration, in fairness to both parties, you need to be truthful and honest and fair and just. And what you don't do is she wrote this fictional book, which was, we both said, she is a great writer. She has amazing style. But she made up fictional characters and fictional people, and she demonized the ICE people, and she made it into an agenda, a political agenda of propaganda against the U.S. immigration people. And I just think that that's wrong. So that's my opinion. I believe if you have skills like her, I mean, thank God you're blessed with these amazing skills, but don't do something like that. That just she just ruined the book. But now we're ready for the second part of it, and our second part of it is going to be, would you recommend the book? And we usually disagree, Richard, so whatever, but how do you feel about it? Would you recommend this book?
Well, I wanted to comment on what you said. You can certainly look at the book and say it's basically an instrument of propaganda to push her point of view that U.S. immigration policy is draconian and evil and borders on evil. I think you can make a reasonable argument that that's so. That's part of what she demonstrates in the book. You're saying the problem is that she didn't present the other side, which is the negative impact of illegal immigration on this country to the extent that, such as you can make out the case. Though again, there's a lot of argument that we need illegal immigrants to take a lot of jobs that Americans aren't taking. Plus, don't they deserve a opportunity if they're coming from a total wasteland of death and destruction? I understand there's arguments on both sides, but I don't want to. I don't want to demonize the author because she had a political agenda. Because a lot of authors have that have actually done good. Okay, do I recommend?
Can I comment
Go
on
ahead.
your,
Go
I
ahead.
want to
Go ahead,
comment
Frank.
on your just a little bit. Just give me
Yeah,
2 seconds.
sure.
I'm not, my problem is not that she doesn't represent the other side. My problem is she's fabricating stories about migrants that no one can verify at all. And she's using that. I mean, is it going to do any good for me to make up a bunch of stories about ICE and all the problems they have with migrants that are coming in, killing and raping people in the United States and making it up? I mean, or writing it about hearsay. I mean, it's kind of like hearsay and made up fabricated stories should not be used in political situations. So
Right.
my problem is that she used it at all. There's no defending it, because you can't defend what she did, and that's the problem that I have. I think she went over the line, Richard. She went over the line of what an author should be doing with a book.
Okay. I do think that it would be legitimate to write a book that supported U.S. immigration policy or U.S. Border Patrol or even vigilantes that are out there to keep illegal immigrants out. You could. That that's you're as entitled to do that as this woman was in writing this book. But there's a long history of people writing novels in order to exaggerate a problem so that the public takes notice. There's a very famous book, I think, that Sinclair Lewis wrote, I think in the 19th century. I remember the one word of the title being Jungle, where it was about the exploitation of American workers without any kind of decent conditions to work, where people would just slip into the batter of whatever they were creating and die, and there was no safety features. The whole point was to create some kind of consumer protection legislation, and it kind of worked. I'm just saying that I'm just using it as an example to say that, look, if you're outraged by something that's occurring and you want to write a book to generate public sentiment in your favor to change things, then it all makes sense, and it's not bad to do that, to create a fictional account to exaggerate or to make a certain point that most people are ignoring. Okay. I think this book is an exciting book. It If you love a suspense novel where you're hanging on every chapter to see how it turns out, I guess you told me not to do that, Frank. Okay. I do think this book can be read as an exciting novel. Um, in my opinion, I don't think this book really changes that this book is okay. I'm going to recommend the book as being as a book that can be positive to acquainting people with the hardships of what it's like for illegal immigrants to come to this country and why it is they come and why they're almost forced to come even if they don't want to. And then what they have to suffer trying to get here. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I think that's fair from your part. I don't believe
Yeah.
that it's right that she made these fictional characters and then started saying horror stories about what happened to them because of ICE mistreating them. I believe that went over the line. I think if she would have left that part out, and she had a great thing going with the book and the story, and she did not need to put that in it. I think putting that part was unfair to ICE. I think it was unfair to the U.S. Immigration Department. I do not think that she should have put a line there and said, this is why these people got deported, and then told the reasons. That went over the line. And if I was going to instruct her to write a book, I would have not, as an editor, let her put that in there. I think it was unnecessary. She could. I think you're right, Richard, as far as over exaggerating and things like that. I mean, she did that all throughout the book with the migrants and everything that happened to them and what have you. But there's a line that you need to not go over, and that is in respect to certain departments, the government and what they do. You don't want to cross that line and make up stories and then say they're the bad guys. So because she did that, it hurts because she's such a great writer. But I mean, she doesn't need this book to make her success. She has, I think, 3 other ones I haven't read yet. But I think that I would definitely not recommend this book because it sets a bad example of what a great writer can do with her skills. You got to not go over that line, and you got to be fair to people. And I think she abused that authority. So I am not going to recommend the book. But anyway, it's my turn to pick the next book. And I was very close to picking one of her books because she has 3 more of them, and it had enough good stuff in the first half. I went, wow, I might pick one. But then as I read that second half, I just couldn't do it. So I had another one that I was kind of wanting to pick, and it's called The Wandering Mind by Jamie Kreiner. It's called The Wandering Mind. And it's
you put it too close to the camera. I couldn't quite
darn
get it.
Can you see it?
The Wandering Mind. How do you spell the author's last name?
It's Jamie Kreiner, Kreiner.
Got it.
And it is what medieval monks tell us about distraction. And I'm anxious to get into that for the next book. But anyway, are there any closing thoughts that you have, Richard?
By the way, is that a book like about meditation or something? Distraction?
I'm not telling you.
Okay, fine. I'll find out.
I'm not, you know me, Richard. I'm giving nothing away. It's like,
okay, Frank.
We're like, it's almost like debate partners, you know. I don't give anything away.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
So I actually I don't. I think anything I would say, I'd just be repeating what I said before. So I don't have anything to add, Frank. But
you know what they call that? Do you know what they call a person like that? A scholar and a gentleman. So Richard, that is what you are, and it's great critiquing books with you. And I look forward to the next one. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, my friend, and we'll see you next time.
Right. Good being with you, Frank. Have a good weekend.
Every once in a while, you come across a book that is so well written, it just needs to have some special consideration. And I think that is the case with American Dirt by Janine Cummins. I talked to some people about this book because I initially gave it a thumbs down. And what they said was the characters in the second half might have been based on real immigrants. We don't know. And because I don't know that, I'm going to give the author the benefit of the doubt and consider that possibly they were. But it is a well-written book. I think Richard pointed out as well that sometimes authors do use books to make political statements. And that could have been the case in this book too. But I will tell you this, at Worth the Read, what I want to do is I want to give the author credit. If it was a well-written book, it was a good storyline, and it's worth the read. This book is definitely worth the read. So I'm going to give it a thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing all of you on our next edition of Worth the Read. Hope you have a great day.